Hello, and welcome to this NJCU Center for the Arts virtual event. We would like to ask everyone on Zoom to please keep your cameras and microphones off during the program. There will be a Q&A section at the end of the program, and we will only be accepting questions and comments via the chat. If you are on Zoom, you can find the option for chat at the bottom of your screen if you are on a computer, or possibly the top right if you are on a different device. If you click that, it will open the chat window where you can type your questions so that they may be read aloud and answered. Please note, the views and opinions expressed in this virtual event and presentation are solely those of the individual artists in their personal capacity and are not reflective of nor represent official policy, position, or views of New Jersey City University. Thank you and enjoy the event.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this NJCU Center for the Arts event, our Creative Process series. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Stephanie Chaikin. I'm the director of the Center for the Arts at NJCU. And tonight we are delighted to welcome two Jersey City artists, Dr. Ann Wallace and Jayne Freeman, who will give us some insight and a deep dive into the creation of work from the most personal level to the experience of bringing it to the world. So to begin, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Jayne, who is going to interview Dr. Wallace about her journey writing through COVID-19. Jayne Freeman is a childbirth educator, postpartum doula, photographer, and a longtime Jersey City resident. She writes a regular parenting column for the Jersey City Times, and she is on the advisory board for the Jersey City Mural Arts Program. Jayne was present at the birth of Ann's second child and the birth of Ann's first published book of poems, Counting by Sevens, where she provided the cover art and author photo. So without further ado, Jayne, please start us off.
Hello, thank you. Hi, everyone. Okay, so as promised, I'm interviewing Ann Wallace this evening. And in case you're unfamiliar with Ann, she is an English professor at NJCU. She's a published writer and poet. She's also a longtime survivor of ovarian cancer and lives with multiple sclerosis as well. In March of this year, Ann was one of the first Jersey City residents to be diagnosed with COVID. And she found herself using her poetry and essays to both communicate the experience of her illness and also to inform the public at large. So that's how all of this started. And we're going to start at the very beginning with this, beginning with the first piece that Ann worked on. Let's start with the first essay that was eventually published in the HuffPost, but interesting to note, started as a Facebook post. Isn't that right?
It did. It started as a few different Facebook posts, that one, about that. I published it on March 15th, and it was about trying to get Molly, my daughter, tested for COVID. And so I didn't post much about it online first because it was a little bit, it felt very personal and we didn't have any cases here yet. And I didn't want to alarm people. And I also didn't know for sure that she had COVID. So I was a little bit wary. And then I was just like, listen, where do I get tested? What information do people have? And I started posting there. And then I wrote this piece.
Okay. I want to look at that piece in a second and talk about that. But let's, why don't we start with one of your poems that you selected for tonight?
Yes.
To kind of give a little bit of a taste of the poetry side of your work.
Sure. Well, also, I feel like I jumped right into answering a question. I wanted to say hello and thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. We've been looking forward to this event. So I am grateful that you're all here, and whether you're on Zoom or on Facebook. So I wanted to share this one poem. It was not one that I wrote right away. You can see I put on any poems that I'm sharing tonight, I put the date of when I wrote it because I wrote a lot, and the timeline, it tells a story in the timeline. So I'm jumping here to August 3rd, and this was published last week in a journal called Clementine Unbound. So I'm going to share this with you. It's called An Abundance. This winter, spring, summer has been a long haul of suffering and silence, of sickbed days on repeat, with life pared down to its essence, my attention honed on the fragile act of breathing in, then out for 4 beats. In, out, speaking, cooking, bathing. Hefty efforts to be weighed each day, any one jettisoned for the other. Yet, amid the scarcity, an abundance has flowed to my small and quiet place within this solitary house of quarantine.
Okay, this poem is written long into your illness. So you use the word long haul in the midst of this poem. And I want to just inform people, because some people are like hearing that term or haven't heard it before. But do you want to describe why we use the term long hauler for those with COVID?
Yeah. So obviously when I became sick, I didn't know, nobody knew that there was such a thing as long haul COVID. It wasn't something I feared. I thought I'd be better in 2 weeks. I mean, I really did. I thought I'd be better. I told my students, just bear with me a little bit. I just need, I'm going to be a little low key for a week and then I'll be back. And I had no idea that it would go on so long. So at around the time that I was sick, 5 or 6 weeks, I was talking to my friend Yaz, who's a doctor at Mount Sinai. She actually came to check in on me because I was really, really sick still. I said, Yaz, is this normal? And she said, yes, we are seeing people who are sick for weeks and weeks. And I thought this is extraordinary. The length of time I've been sick. And anyway, so around that time in late April, early March, people online were starting to realize, and people were writing about it, mostly like in Facebook groups, right? This idea of the long tail of COVID, it was becoming a thing that people were recognizing was happening. But the people who knew were mostly people who were dealing with it, like the wider public didn't know. So anyway, what we do know now is that this is not a 2-week illness for many people. It's something that about 35%, the World Health Organization has realized that about 35% of people are sick for 3 weeks or longer, and about 10% of people are sick for months. And that's the group I'm in, is the long haul group. Sometimes it's called the long tail, or it's called post-COVID syndrome. It goes by a few different names depending. It's regional sometimes because it's a worldwide phenomenon, right? So different people use different terms.
Okay, so again, that poem was written in August. So you had been struggling for many, many months at that point, probably expecting maybe summer to give you some reprieve. But going back to the beginning, let's talk about that. There was so much struggle for everyone to get tested. We just, everybody was at a loss as to where to go, how to proceed. And, I always remember this Facebook post that you made that just seemed so grim. It was still very wintry in March. And I believe you were in a car, but you waited in the rain for hours. It's a lyric, isn't it? Just
as well have been.
Yeah, but you waited with your daughter, both of you not feeling well. There was just something about that was just so intense. And, I wanted you to talk about that a little bit, and then how that sort of segued into you writing the HuffPost piece where, describe that.
That day was after I wrote the HuffPost piece. I wrote that HuffPost piece was published on March 15th. And so Molly had started getting sick on the 8th. So she was only a week into her illness, but her illness was striking. She had a terrible dry cough that was relentless, that telltale COVID cough. And she had a fever, and it wasn't a very high fever, it was a low grade fever, but it wouldn't stop. And she had no energy. She was just like almost lifeless, right? Like she was so depleted. And I thought, this is not the way this kid gets sick. This is not recognizable to me. And it fits with everything that I've read and heard about COVID, particularly that cough and the persistent fever. So I couldn't get her tested because at that time, the CDC had very strict criteria regarding testing. You had to have been out of the country, et cetera. You needed to have known contact with a person who had a known diagnosis. The irony of that was, with no testing available because of these strict guidelines, how could anybody have contact with a known case in an area where there weren't any cases yet, right? Like, it was sort of this catch-22. So then when I started to feel sick, which was a couple days after I wrote that piece, she got sick on March 8th, and then I started to feel sick around the 17th. Then I called my doctor that Friday, so 3 or 4 days in, because I thought, oh, this is just anxiety. I feel this pressure in my chest, but that's just because I'm anxious. And it wasn't. And I called my doctor. She said, Anne, you have to get tested right away. And I also want someone to listen to both of your lungs, like for both of you, because Molly's been sick too long now, and you have MS, and like, this isn't good. And they're both sick. It just doesn't add up in the right way. So then I did have that long day, and I posted about it. It took me, I think, till the next day. It took a lot of energy for me to make that post. I took a lot of photos. Sorry, let me back up. It was very difficult to get tested at that time, but New Jersey had just opened up these drive-through testing facility, or a drive-through testing facility at a community college outdoors. And so we did that, and they opened for testing at 9 a.m. and everybody said, you've got to get there early, you have to get in line. So we got up at 4 and we left. We were there before 6 a.m. like, we left by 5. And bear in mind, you cannot get out of your car, so you have to plan out your bathroom usage, right? This is like, everything was locked down. There's no place that you could go to a bathroom anywhere, like at a gas station or anything. So it's like, I remember Constantine asking me, why don't you leave tonight? I'm like, I can't leave the night before because I can't. This is not possible. So anyway, we got up at 4 and we're there before 6, and we waited in line, and at about 9:30 we were turned away.
Sure.
Because, excuse me, they ran out of tests, and we were about 15 cars from the front. So we were right there, we could see it. And then they just waved us through, and it was a National Guard operation. Everybody, they were like military vehicles, people were in their military uniforms, and you couldn't roll down your window, you couldn't talk to anybody, they'd wave you on, and it felt like another world. It was such an unfamiliar experience. So I posted pictures, and I posted a long thing about it. And then I went and called my nurse practitioner after that. I found, drove on my way, because you couldn't pull over anywhere. And I pulled over on the highway, and I took an exit and pulled over. And I called my nurse practitioner, and she said, I really want to get you tested today. And we called around everywhere, and people did not have tests. The urgent care facilities didn't. There was no place to get tested. But I did go to an urgent care facility place in Hoboken, where I called them, and they said, we don't have any tests, but you can come in and we will do chest x-rays, and we'll listen to your lungs. And if you need to go to the ER, we'll send you, because you don't want to go unless you need it, because if you don't have COVID, you'll get it there. Oh, and the end of that story is that when we got to urgent care, the doctor he said, I'm allotted five tests a day.
Wow.
Sorry, it's hard to go back to that moment. It was such a loaded moment of despair, right? I mean, 5 tests a day at an urgent care facility. Anyway, she used 2 of them on us.
Unbelievable.
And to think about, part of what makes this hard for me to talk about, I mean, there's so many things that make it hard for me to talk about, to go back to that moment, but also to be that doctor and to have to allot and parcel out treatment.
Right.
It's hard to think about, like, how did she make those decisions and to be in that position. But anyway, thank goodness she did. It's because then I tested positive.
Yeah, I mean, you know, everybody was scrambling at that point, and I just can't even imagine how fearful you must have been, because here you have your sick daughter, and it's your imperative as a mother to protect and take care of her as she's sick, and then you're also recognizing that you're at risk and you are already high risk. You know, it's like the medical system is failing you at every which way. So now, taking this back into you as a writer, this is so much to process and turn into, you know, kind of churn out this experience into something that reflects your emotion in that time. I feel like initially you had to start with the facts, with the basics, and the HuffPost piece is very straightforward and, you know, heartfelt, genuine, you know, concern as a mother and as somebody who is, you know, worrying about your own sickness. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the way all of your poetry that is connected to your health is like now that's sort of emerging. And I don't know if you want to go to the next poem, just to give people a taste of, this poem is literally about your vertigo with your MS, right? Yeah. So just giving people a little bit of background of how you process something as simple as, again, this was being tested as well. You're right, didn't they have to like push you into vertigo in order to assess your vertigo? I got to tell you, this poem, it's one of my favorites, but it literally makes me nauseated when I read it. You do such a good job at describing the sensation. Why don't you go ahead and read it?
So this poem is from my collection, Counting by Sevens. So we're just going to go back in time now, because I write about illness already, because I've had a lot of it in my life. And so I had this series of tests. This was many years ago, several years ago, and they are called vestibular tests. So I have MS, and one of my symptoms for MS is that I have vertigo. I have it on a regular basis. Interestingly, I have had very little vertigo throughout my COVID experience, or maybe I don't notice it. I don't know. It's small blessings, right? Strange. But anyway, so my doctor sent me for vestibular tests, which are tests of the vestibular system that's like in your inner ear that causes vertigo, to see if my vertigo is coming from my ears or from my brain. And if it's from my brain, then that's central nervous system, and that is incurable. I went through these tests to find out what I pretty much already knew, which is that it is from my central nervous system. There is no cure for it. So I went through this torture. So there were 3 tests, and this one is called vestibular test 3. And I wrote a poem about each one. So this was the 3rd, and I had these back to back to back in one day, one horrifying day. So vestibular test 3. Have you ever counted by sevens? Yes, sevens. Not when you were in 3rd grade, but as an adult. It's not easy, the counting, but there is solace in numbers. I count by sevens as instructed, seated in an unfamiliar chair. The chair in its dark chamber spins and spins, the motion continuing in my body even when the chair has stopped. Again, around and around, slowly, gently, then faster, faster. The doctor sends me in motion, orders the numbers, secure in her well-lit booth I cannot see. My head secured in a brace in a chair not meant for comfort, with a back my body cannot touch, pitched forward, pitching, my head encircled by metal, immobilized, spiraling in the blackened cell, climbing upwards, Spinning, I count 7, 14, relying on known numbers 21, 28. Predictable, a small pride. I know this. It gets harder to remain distracted as the numbers go higher. 70, 77, into unfamiliar territory. The spinning, again, unsupported, my back aches. Unsettled, my stomach tumults. Ignore the tossing, keep counting. I know the numbers. And add by 7, even as I reach higher, even as my stomach whirls. Spinning, I don't, but I can count on numbers. On 7, all the way up to 231.
Well, I don't know if other people felt the spinning that you described there, but I always do. And it's just amazing to me how you can pull something out of, this is a clinical test that was done to you, yet somehow it feels like this is inflicted upon you. It reminds me of like when they have to test Navy SEALs, I think, to see like how their, I don't know, how their brain reacts after they're deprived of oxygen or something. And they also make them do a simple task, like play a card game or something. It's a very similar thing, but you know, when you describe it, it sounds purely torturous.
It felt purely torturous. It really did. To be honest, I almost vomited during it. They gave me a bucket and then they kept spinning me.
Yeah, I mean, you convey that very, you know, clearly, because I also felt that, which is a terrible thing to say about someone's poem. It makes me nauseated, but it's also a very good sign because you're really communicating that that feeling. So,
but I, you know, to that point.
Go ahead.
Oh, to that point, I mean, I didn't write poetry until I had these vestibular tests. In fact, that was writing poetry was the only way I could capture what that was. I couldn't write an essay about these tests. I mean, I could, but you wouldn't feel it. Like for me, I knew that it wouldn't be the same thing. And so poetry was the form that worked for me for this. And I ended up writing these. It probably took me a month to fully recover from these tests. They were horrifying. They really threw my body into a tailspin, no pun intended. But I, you know, that weekend I was just in bed recovering because my vertigo was so horrible. And I wrote these poems on my phone, and I needed an outlet. I needed a way to process. And I don't write all of my poems as a therapeutic measure, but this one writing these did have that effect. Plus, I really needed to capture it. I really needed to try to convey what this was. I gave these to my doctor after. And yeah, because I wanted him to know what hell he was putting people through. So, and I wasn't upset with him. Like, I didn't mean it like, here, read this. I just wanted him to have a sense that these tests are not a small thing.
That's kind of beautiful. That's very Oliver Sacks. You know, was it a neurologist that you were seeing?
My neurologist. I also wrote another poem about Oliver Sacks and my neurologist. Speaking ironically, that I don't think I gave him that one.
Well, it all makes sense. It all kind of ties together. So you're talking about this sort of processing through your poetry, and now we come into April, which I don't know how many years you've been doing this, but I know I've seen you do it before, where you spend the month of April, you write a poem every day, and you manage to do this during this time with you still struggling with COVID symptoms. So talk to us a little bit about this, both how you did it and also the concept of a poem a day. Where did this come from exactly?
So April, the month of April is National Poetry Month. So for the past few years, I have taken on the challenge. So a lot of poets do this, not everyone, you don't have to, obviously, to write a poem a day. And I enjoy doing it. It's difficult, but I love anything where there's like a regimen. I'm like a glutton for punishment in that way, but I love like having a practice. sort of like marathon training or anything of that nature. Like I like having a goal. And so, you know, I started feeling sick on March 17th. By April 1st, I'd been in the emergency room twice. I'd been sent home on bed rest because anytime I stood, my oxygen levels would plummet. I was in very bad shape, but they did not have room for me in the ER. I mean, not in the ER. They didn't there either, but in the hospital, which maybe is a blessing in retrospect, knowing everything we know. But so they sent me home, and it was a terrifying time. I could barely speak because I was really, really short of breath. Standing for the most simple tasks was taxing. Taking a shower, if I did that every few days, and that was a terrifying thing because I would actually I had a shower stool, like because my daughter had been injured months before, so we had like a stool you put in the shower. I used that because I was afraid of passing out in the shower or after the shower, and very nearly did many times. So, and anyway, so just to give you an idea of like how the simplest things were compromised and very difficult, and I couldn't cook, for instance. And so, so I was lying down basically all day, and every day, that was all I could do. And I couldn't even really talk on the phone with family or whoever. And we were obviously strictly quarantined. I mean, the whole world, the whole region was shut down here. And hold on a second. Sorry, my daughter's right there. I'm live right now. So anyway, I thought, well, let me try this. Let me try to write a poem a day. And if I can't do it, I can't do it, but I'm going to try. And there were a couple of reasons why I wanted to do it. For one, this is my response to feeling crappy, having illness or whatever. I write through these kinds of things. And so I thought I'm going to try to do that. Another reason I wanted to do it was that you might know that with COVID, brain fog and neurological problems are a real hallmark of it, and thinking was a struggle. So I thought this is a good exercise for my brain. And poems can be short; they can be 3 lines long, right? Like I don't have to write epic poetry here. I can write something short, and I just want to try it and see what I can do, and I think it'll be good for me. And I also really, really thought telling this story and having this record matters. I didn't think that there were, I'm a writer, so I am equipped to do that. Sorry, this is what I do, so I'm able to do this. And I think a lot of people who aren't writers can't do this. People can tell their story in lots of ways, but the story needs to be told. And it's not just the story of me, it's the story of millions of people now, right? And if I can tell it, I will, because I think it needs to be told. And at that time, we didn't know how many millions of people it would be, but we did know it would be many, many, many people.
So that's happening in April. You're going through the whole month, writing a poem a day. I know how weak you were. I know how fatigued you were. Were you on oxygen at that point?
I wasn't on oxygen until late April. No, I couldn't qualify for it. I kept asking for it. I asked at the hospital. They will not send you home with oxygen. And you have to qualify. And the way you normally qualify is a home nurse comes and they have to take your oxygen level readings. That is impossible during a quarantine, during a pandemic when you have COVID. But finally, my doctor in late April was able to convince them that I needed it. And I really, really needed it. This was no small thing. And I got it then. I wish I'd gotten it much sooner. It would have been, you know what it did? It took the level of terror down enough.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. We'd give you
here to like up to my eyeballs level.
Right, sure, to give you that peace of mind. It's funny, you mentioned just briefly in passing about how writing the poem a day you compared to marathon running. I had the exact same thought when I looked at all the poems that you had written, just kind of in a grid of the month of April. And I thought, God, she's so disciplined that's why she run marathons. And but I want to talk about that for a second, because it also speaks to the fact that you were very physically fit. You didn't, you didn't go into this with weak lungs or anything. You were, I know you haven't run a marathon in a long time, but you've still been a regular runner and so forth. And there's also that like perception by the public in some ways that, unhealthy people suffer from COVID worse than healthy people. So you want to talk about that for a minute? And then we'd like to hear one of the poems that you selected from the month of April.
Sure. Yeah, so, I have MS, but I mean, a lot of people here watching now know me, and you probably know it's not a very visible illness with me. I have a very manageable form of MS. It's not debilitating. I work long hours. I am very active physically, mentally, and always. I rarely stop, basically. The week that when Molly fell ill, I went running. That weekend before, I'd been in Boston. We walked all around. I walked around Walden Pond, which is not a very long walk, but there's a piece in there that I need to write. So about walking around Walden Pond and thinking about living deliberately and in isolation, and then going home into quarantine. But yeah, I'm very active. I'm not, and I have had no lung issues ever in my life. I have no heart problems. I don't have these sorts of issues, and lots of people. And so I do have a pre-existing condition, but a lot of people with long haul COVID do not. And in fact, most long haulers are young. They're in their, say, 40s, but many of them are younger. They're in their 20s and their 30s. They are like fitness teachers. They are parents of toddlers who are on their feet running all day, right? You have a toddler, it's very hard to do that and not be pretty active. So they're the people who are long haulers are not like a sickly bunch going into this. That is one of the things that's really devastating. Anybody who has long haul COVID is it's devastating, or any kind of COVID is devastating, but it is like mentally very difficult for a lot of people who've been very well their whole lives to then have this extremely debilitating illness. So, should I read one of these?
Please do. Yes.
Sure. So I'm going to read. I have a few pieces from Days in a Row in April. I think I'll start with Sleepless. Maybe I'll read a couple of them. The first one is the longest, but I did want to share this one about the nights. I'll read Sleepless. And this one was written on April 19th. So remember, I got sick on March 17th. So I'm more than 4 weeks in by this point. Called Sleepless. Every night, interminable, runs on repeat. The false victory upon waking, crushed as I check my sleeping math and count the short hours. 3.5, sometimes fewer. My hands tingle and numb, head tightens and pounds, fingers of pain curling around my temples, the pillows too thick, too hot, my shoulders ensnared under twisted covers, my feet boil and kick free as I flail for panicked comfort. Darkness and oxygen run low in tandem as the pressure grows fierce, pounding, churning. I squeeze my eyes shut, cradle my skull, and weep. The nights, they are interminable, but the mornings, they are worse. This was before I was on oxygen, and my oxygen ran low every night, and we realized that was one of the problems why I couldn't sleep for more than 3.5 hours, if that, night. It was horrible. I was so sleep deprived and so sick, and all I needed to do was sleep, and I couldn't. If you don't mind, I'm gonna go to the next one from the next day. Spring Song. The sirens cry the soundtrack of this silent spring. A wail intertwined with birdsong by day. With my daughter's dry cough through the night. life and death bound together, contrapuntal, on and on, so that I no longer hear the sirens until I do.
You know, I remember from that time period that you had a lot of nightmares. I don't even want to call them bad dreams. You had actual nightmares that manifested as like your house is on fire, or there was a collapse or flooding. They felt catastrophic. I may be getting the imagery wrong, but they felt catastrophic, and you get a sense of that in this poem. Your lack of sleep, which of course, you know, kind of drives you a bit mad on its own. And, you know, and just the intensity of your worry at that point. And just something about that, hearing your daughter's cough from the other room is
For months. He was over her like acute illness after 3 weeks, but that cough, it didn't go away until late June or so. It was a horrible sound. And of course I was up.
Right, it's a reminder, you know, it's like you it's always in the background. And those
And if you remember,
go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, and you know, for those of you who don't live in the New York area, I should explain that in this area, in April, everything was locked down, right? We were all in quarantine, and we had curfews and such, and people were off the roads, but the sound you could hear 24/7 were sirens. It was just nonstop. And I feel like when I hear a siren now, it's triggering. It was too much. I mean, everything was too much, right? Of course it was, but it was just nonstop, and it was summer, and so the birds, and then the coughing and the sirens. It was just these three things together. It's just that's my summer, and spring, and not just mine. I mean, it is for many people. So yeah, I just feel like that's the sound of April in the New York area.
So in the midst of all of this reflection that you're doing, and, you know, writing your month-long regimen of poetry and so forth, you're also keeping the more essay style going, and that started to become very newsworthy. Your story started to get picked up by the media. Your story was shared all over the place. Let's just talk about that for a second, because that must have been a very bizarre feeling. It's like you're getting this sort of notoriety for being ill, for writing about it, for putting it out there, and as I said in the beginning, you know, communicating to the public at large.
Yeah.
That's different than writing poetry. Let's just talk about that. Let's switch gears for a second and go into that for a moment.
Throughout like the month of April, so March, April, May, my energy was obviously very, very limited. So poems were sort of manageable. But the other thing I was doing was I was writing on social media, I was writing posts, and it quickly became kind of apparent that people were craving information about COVID. And I was like a sponge, a sort of slow-witted sponge, because my brain wasn't working very quickly, but I was just reading everything I could. I was reading medical research papers about COVID. I was reading, I was trying to look for very reliable sources, but the information was coming out quickly, and it wasn't all peer reviewed by necessity. Like, it didn't have that process that medical articles normally go through. So I was just gathering everything I could. And I knew I was doing that, and lots of other people weren't, but people were still hungry for this information. So I was trying to put any of that information out there for people, but also I was sharing my lived experience of COVID, and I was doing that through social media posts on Facebook. I think we have some of those in the slides. Maybe go to one of them. I think I have one from May that I put in.
If we could jump to slide 11.
So anyway, as we pull that up, And I was, so right, here I am at 10 weeks, right? My 10-week COVID selfie doesn't look a hell of a lot different than my 7-week selfie. Same damn couch, same damn oxygen tubing, same damn virus. Yeah, and I look pretty sick there, I guess. That kind of gray, I have to say. It's a little jarring. But I was putting this out there so people knew, right, that this doesn't necessarily go away. Like, you know, when I hit 4 weeks, that felt like a long time to be sick, and I told people about it. And when it was 5 weeks, I told people about it, and I shared that, you know, about the sleeplessness and about the headaches and about the nerve pain and tingling and everything else, all the other symptoms I was feeling. I was trying to share it, and a lot of people wrote to me privately because they were feeling symptoms and they didn't know what to do, or some people wrote to me because they had symptoms and they were afraid to tell their families or their partner or their boss or whoever. And my answer is always tell people, because if you have it, you're going to need help. Like, you're going to need support, emotional, but you're also going to need some actual help, because, you know, when I was really sick, I couldn't cook. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do laundry. I needed a lot of support. I couldn't get myself to the hospital when I needed to go. So that other one you saw was my 10-week post. This one that's now on the screen was from June 17th, and this was after, like, I was in these COVID long haul groups that were forming. They were sort of newly formed in June, and people were talking about the shame that they felt and how people didn't believe them because they hadn't had a positive test result. Now, bear in mind what I just told you about COVID testing in March. I got tested because my daughter was sick, so there were 2 of us, and because I had MS, right? If both of us hadn't been sick, we would not have gotten tested. I would be a person without a positive test result. Same damn virus, same damn symptoms, but I wouldn't have had the evidence of the test results. So there were a lot of people in that boat, and there still are, you know, different parts of the country, different parts of the world, it's harder to get tested. I happen to live in an area where it's easier now. But anyway, so I post, you know, I was reading all this information from people that they were posting about people not believing that they were still sick, that people didn't believe they were ever sick because they didn't have a positive test result, etc. So I wrote that long post that we just saw on Facebook, and people shared it 100 times. And on Twitter, that would be a drop in the bucket, but on Facebook, that's a lot of shares. And so I thought, I've got to get this out there more widely. So I wrote a piece for HuffPost, and it was published on the 100th day of my illness, and it was published a week later, on June 24th, on day 100. And that got a lot of attention because that long haul story was not in the media yet. And so you see, I was on Good Morning America, because this screenshot is from Good Morning America. They called me and I was on the show the next day. Katie Couric shared it on her newsletter because she has this whole COVID, she has a newsletter, but lately, these many months, it's been focused on COVID information and other stuff too. But she shared it there, and Fox Radio even interviewed me. They did a long interview with me, 11 minutes long, and it was actually a really good interview. So it got people kind of took notice of this piece because it was one of the first stories of somebody who'd been sick for months, that people were shocked that this was happening. But it was, and I was by no means the only person it was happening to.
It's kind of amazing when you think about it that way, because you used Facebook with this strategic social media message. You know, you're putting it out there. You know, some people are funny about that in terms of, and you alluded to this earlier about like, oh, it's private medical information, blah, blah, blah. But there was no time this wasn't the time, rather, to be private about these things. You did the opposite of that. You made it extraordinarily public. You put it out on social media. And what's so interesting is that from there, it launched into essays that were picked up by the media at large. I mean, I'm going to say that story went viral. It was literally all over the place, picked up by various media outlets.
In different countries too, it was international. Yeah.
Yeah, international, right? So, you know, that's a big deal. And also, I mean, just in keeping with us discussing this tonight, it's a big deal in terms of, again, you communicating to the public what your experience has been. It's also like interesting on the side of you being a writer. And, you know, we don't really generally think of like turning a Facebook post into an essay. I mean, you know, but that's exactly what happened. You know, but that's a testament to you being a good writer, and again, you know, you not being afraid to put this information out there in a social media way where everybody can see it. Anyone can pass it around. You made these posts public so that other people could share and pass around, as you said. And yes, 100 shares is significant, but you know, as you turned it into something that was more of an essay piece, you know, then it kind of exploded. And
yeah. Although, you know, keep in mind, like if you look at that, I put it onto a page deliberately, and it took me a while to format it on that page for this presentation because it is a long Facebook post, right? This is why I'm no good at Twitter.
Of course, you're limited to just a few words. You don't like that.
No, and I can't deal it. Not even words, it's character counts. Goodness, and then I have to abbreviate, which you know kills me. Sorry.
That's the English professor, doesn't want to abbreviate.
Right, but I even did a word count when I made this page because when I caught it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is long. It's 1,100 words. The HuffPost piece is probably around 1,100. It's like 1,200 words. I'm not sure how long it is. And it's different. I wrote this for a Facebook page. I rewrote it for a HuffPost. It's different, but the points, the 4 points I made here, you'll see it says first, second, third, and then finally or something.
Right.
There are 4 points, and I stuck with those 4 points for the HuffPost piece. So the like structure is the same, but I wrote it differently for HuffPost because it's a different audience and people don't know me there. And like I already had sort of a built-in audience here. Anyway, 1,100 words, right? So also bear in mind, now by June, I'm feeling a little bit better, but not by no means great. I had a post from May, the 10-week post. That one is considerably shorter. That one was shared like 260 times or something. Anyway, those posts that they were like essays, that one in particular, but other ones were too. And it took me days to work up to writing those. I wrote them about once a week, and it was like, okay, I'm going to write a post today. Like I was still teaching through this. So like some days I'd be like, okay, I'm going to try to make a video if I have any breath today for my students. And if I can't, then it's just all going to be, I'm going to type and I'm going to check in with them and do some grading and all, because I was teaching. So like, and I could do one class a day basically. And that was it from my couch, right? A Facebook post was like a day's activity.
Sure.
And then reading the comments, that was just overwhelming, or like reading them, but then responding. And then I feel like I need to respond. And then people would send me messages and then I felt horrible because I couldn't respond because I just didn't have it in me. It was so hard to put these words on the page. And that's something I have never struggled with. So it was a lot. And I wanted to say this also in terms of like, so look at the gap of time between March 15th HuffPost piece and June 24th. I was trying to write some prose pieces in there in between, but I could not. I would start and I'd write like 400 words or something and it wouldn't be tight yet. And I'd go back and try to shape it some more the next day. And I couldn't pull them together because my brain was just far too weary. And so was my body, obviously, but mentally it was too much. So by June, the fact that I could write that piece was in itself a victory for me. That I could do it. And then I had to do some editing with the editor from HuffPost and we got it out there. And, I had to give them like the data, like, they fact check everything and I have to give them my sources. If I say that long haulers are sick for for more than 3 weeks, I have to give them the data of that. So like, even pulling that stuff together was hard, even though I had it all. It's just like, that's a task.
It does sound exhausting, and that's a good sort of transition into the next poem, also written around this time period. called Rest. Are you up for reading
Well,
that?
you know, that one I put it in because it was around the time of that May Facebook post, and I just wanted to have them. You know, I can't find it. Well, if it
Oh,
comes
you
up,
don't, it's okay. Oh, I'll read it. No.
yeah, it is. So we showed that May Facebook post from May 24th, maybe. This was a poem I wrote a couple days before it. So if you want to think about how I write in different genres, these were two different takes on being sick for 10 weeks, right? So one was a Facebook post, and then here was the poem that preceded it. So I started with the poem, Rest. My shut-in lungs are weary, so weary from each breath, each stale breath, tired too of oxygen concentrated and pushing into me when my whole body just wants to slow for a heavy beat. That's the feeling I had. And then you saw that photo of the Facebook post where I look gray with the oxygen. And we sort of sit hand in hand together as like, I don't know,
That's exactly right. You feel the weight, the weary weight of the illness at that point. You know, I do want to leave some time for questions if there are people in here who have some questions. But let's continue going, but I don't want to like go too over time. How are you feeling, Anne? I mean, do you have stamina for another 20 minutes maybe?
I do. I know that Stephanie had asked me if I could do a little bit of like sort of like a writing exercise, but don't worry, I'm not going to ask anyone to write. But if we go back to, there's a slide with a 3-line poem called Another Day of COVID. Could we go to that slide? There we go. Okay, so I wanted to, so on April 27th, so I read before the poems from April 19th, April 20th. I actually have the April 21st slide, the poem in here as well. We can talk about that in a minute. But this is from April 22nd, and I wanted to pull these poems all from the same sequence of days. This day, now I did say a poem a day could be short, but you know, if I write a 3-line poem, I'm going to write a bunch of them. So this day I wrote 3 poems. They were all short because it still didn't feel like enough, but I didn't have much in me. So the poems were all short, and this one was Another Day of COVID. April sirens. I visited 2 doctors and a nurse in one day from the safety of my couch. That's where I started that day, and then I ended up writing 2 more poems, maybe 1 for each visit, 2 doctors and a nurse. I was doing a lot of telehealth appointments and phone call. My doctor's office was checking in on me every day by phone, and I was having telehealth appointments. And those sirens show up again. The sirens, they haunted me. But I wanted to share this form because this was a day I was exhausted. I'd had 3 appointments and I thought I do not have a poem, but damn it, I'm going to do it. So I thought, okay, I learned this little form in a workshop a couple of years ago, and I use it every so often. I've taught it before. And it's sort of like a haiku. And the beauty of a haiku is that in 3 lines, you have something that is time and place specific and captures a mood or a feeling. That's what a haiku does, right? And it's best. And so take out the syllable counts here. This form is not about a syllable count, but the way to write a poem like this, and this is what I've had my students do before, is start off with an image from your day. Could be anything, something tangible though, a sound or a thing, right? So I have some sunflowers on the table behind me. I maybe would say sunflowers. Then add the month, November sunflowers. Then add a statement. Think of some statements that are true of today. Yesterday, we reached 100,000 cases of COVID in the United States. Break that line in 2. And here's my poem. November sunflowers. Yesterday, we reached 100,000 cases of COVID in the United States. And there's your poem.
I gotta say, you make it quite effortless, yes.
But anyone can do it is my point. And you can do it by like, and you try not to like think about like, oh, sunflowers, but in advance, I could say it could be anything. November sweater.
No, no. November sunflowers, that, you know, it's a good visual.
And it's like specific to my day, like it's seasonal. Sunflowers are what I'm looking at today in my living room. I have sunflowers, and so yeah, and it's visual. So like the sirens in that other poem, April sirens, that for me, that conjures up an image right there, and it always will for the remainder of my life. April sirens, the year of COVID. Excuse me. So I just, you know, so when people say, I don't know what to write about, well, start with where you are. Start with what is right in front of you, and think about the snapshot of what's happening in your life. And it's the juxtaposition of the month, of the sunflowers, of the statement of hitting more than 100,000 cases, right? But it doesn't have to be as heavy a statement as that. It could be anything, but that comes to me because that's something that's on my mind. And so any statement, and it shouldn't be like I'm so angry that we reached 100,000. It should just be a statement. Let the statement be, and then it sits in contrast to the beginning, and they sit together. And there's that together, the reader takes the meaning from it. So there's a little exercise I want to dabble in.
That was great. I really like that. It definitely gets the wheels turning about where you can go with these things. But all right, let's go through a little bit more of we have a couple more slides that I want to talk about. I want to talk about your book of poems just for a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about that, because it is sort of, you know, the background in all of this, and it's those poems also deal with a lot of illness. It's not all illness in there, but you know what's kind of interesting to me in Counting by Sevens, I think about this poem you have, The Good Patient, right? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Patient. And there's a line in it where you say, who comforts the good patient, which is so poignant and is so universal right now, particularly because there are so many people suffering alone, and that is your story as well. So you wrote that line long before we had the isolation of COVID. How does that line feel to you now? How do you relate to that as the good patient?
It's hard. It's so interesting that line sticks out to you, because when my 100-day HuffPost piece, 100-day of COVID piece, my fourth point in that piece is that if your doctor doesn't believe you're sick, get another doctor, or keep asking, keep pushing for what you need. If people are not listening, now is not the time to be a good patient. I think I even say that exactly word for word. This is not the time to be a good patient. Now, I am a good patient, and by good patient, I mean, well, it means a few different things, but at its basic level, I'm a good patient because I have good doctors. Let me say that. And that's what lets me be a good patient, is that if you can trust your healthcare providers, and you can be a good patient, which means you can do what they tell you to do. And you can, but even then, if you're not having a conversation with your doctor, if this isn't a real dialogue, and if you're not being listened to, then cut the good patient performance and push back, because right now, in the beginning, when I first got sick, doctors, and they were struggling for information, and because it was this, it's a new virus, they didn't have it. Nobody knew. We didn't have this information, so they were grasping for information. And the good doctors, like the people who are really good and thoughtful, really effective, I should say. I don't want like good versus bad, but You know, I noticed like some doctors would have real conversations and you could see the wheels turning and they're like, oh, that's really interesting. Let me look into that. Maybe it's this, let's figure this out. And I think you need this, let's try that. I want to refer you to so-and-so. And then they would follow up, or like my doctor, making sure I got the oxygen at home and making, you know, putting a case manager on my case and who called me every day. That's the kind of care people need. That's what everybody should get. And we do not have, you know, unfortunately, we do not have that kind of fantastic across the board healthcare health system for all patients. And so if you're not getting it, demand it. I remember I was even put in touch with somebody from Jersey City, like the Department of Health and Human Services. They put me in touch with another person who had been sick for a long time, who was a long hauler before people really knew that term. And so I was speaking to this woman, I'm like, you've got to be demanding that, like, you need it, this matters. And another thing, Jayne, that you just mentioned was about the suffering and silence. And I remember that woman saying to me, because she was a single woman who lived alone, she said, you know, I'm so afraid I could just die at home and nobody, excuse me, nobody would know. Like, you know, and that's not the first person I've heard this from.
Yes.
But it's true and it's real. And it's horrifying. It's horrifying because people were dying alone and people didn't always know. And then you know, I'm going to add one other element to this. You know, as you know, Constantine, my fiance, is a funeral director. And so while I was sick in quarantine here, and I was with my kids, so, you know, they were taking care of me as much as they could. And so I didn't have quite the terror of, I could die and nobody would know. My kids would know. I mean, how horrifying is that, right? But so while I was living through that here in isolation here, you know, we got, between Constantine and me, we got this like the two extremes, the two horrors of this. I mean, well, actually, there's so many other horrors. I mean, the fact is that I'm alive, so that's one like huge like win. Is that? But he, you know, he was dealing with funeral after funeral after funeral, and people who were dying alone at home, and people who, you know, could not be picked up from the morgues, the makeshift morgues, and the bodies just, you know, piled up in the New York area, and when I say this is not to disparage any hospital system, everything was overrun. This was not the fault of like how could that hospital let that happen? No, this was where we were. And it was, you know, part and parcel with the sirens were the hearses and the, you know, vehicles and the morgues. And, you know, so that was all happening on the outside, throughout this, like that was what he was living through while I was living through this here.
Well, that took a very grim turn.
I know.
But you know, I know that is the reality, and that whole side with the funeral home and everything is very, very difficult for the two of you on these like sort of opposite ends of a terrible piece to this virus. So, you know, and the impact on everyone. Let's, again, I don't want to go too over time and so forth, and I don't want to exhaust you, and I do want to take some questions. If you don't mind, if we can, let's pick up where we left off. I just want to see, oh, sorry, I'm looking at my slides. Why don't we just kind of maybe jump to slide 15 for a second? Just talk, or perhaps this one, just talk a bit about this, and you know, and then a couple more of the wrap-ups, and then let's see if we have a little bit of time for a Q&A.
Sure. So I said before that, you know, I picked out some poems from a sequence of days, and so this one was the April 21st poem, and it's called Chest X-ray in the Time of Coronavirus. So the only time I left my house during these days was when I was going to the emergency room, or then my doctor saw me in person in either the 20th or the 21st. I had that day where I had two calls, two doctor's appointments and a call with my nurse, and one of them my doctor said, and one of those was to my doctor, who said, I wanted you to come in, I want to see you. Didn't like what she was seeing through telehealth. So I went in the next day, and I had my appointment with her, and part of that was I needed to have another chest x-ray. One thing with COVID is that anytime you go anywhere, you get a chest x-ray. So I have had, I don't know, 10 chest x-rays in the past 7 months probably. But I wanted to show the process, the revising process, because part of this talk is about about writing. And so these poems that I wrote on the day of, some of them like in April or in May and June and July, my plan each day was not to write a finished poem. It was to write a complete poem, a complete draft, but I never expected that they would be like finished, sometimes more than others. But so this is one that I wrote. This is what on the left-hand side, you see what I wrote on the 21st. I almost cried when I struggled during the x-ray, knowing the risk was high. This almost cried is because I was so worried about the x-ray tech because I had COVID and he's in a closed room with me. So that's where this poem comes from. It's not just about it, and it was so hard to do the x-ray because I had to stand. I had to put my arms up. That was all hard, and he was helping me, and he's helping me, and all I wanted to say is go away, and protect yourself. And that's a weird thing to be feeling, like I can't stand up and I need help, but I don't want anyone to help me because I'm a risk. It's a really strange cognitive thing to deal with. So anyway, I didn't think that this poem was successful in its original form, and you can see that I kept revising it. What I have here is version 5, which is where it is now. And I wanted to get these different pieces sort of separated out. So I played with the form, and I also pared it down because I didn't need to say I almost cried. You don't need that. You don't need to know that. I wanted that to come through in the words. I probably, I already ruined it because I told you that that's the feeling of the poem, but I'm going to read it for you. And you can read this poem down and then down, or you can read it across. I'm going to read it across. Stand here, back a little. He guided me into place, a stumble, a sidestep. Arms up, above your head. Raised my hands. Back straight, chin up. Lifted my drooping head. A crumple, a reach for help. Offered his hand. Take a breath. Let it out. Withdrew behind the wall. A heavy breath, a woozy swoon. For safety. Again, and hold. Press the button, another breath, a viral wave, a whoosh, a rocking side to side, and let it out. Hurried back to my side, spine caves, body heaves, took my arm, for the chair, a winded collapse, and eased me down.
I love that you can read it, just all the way across, and then as 2 columns. That's really lovely, and it all still makes sense. But yeah, it's another one that puts you in that moment, that gives you that feeling of what it was like for you at that time, and that little struggle there, and even your concern for the lab tech. That's just every time you had to walk into the hospital, I felt like it was just very emotional and difficult and draining for you. Yeah. So, all right. Let's go to can we go to the next slide? Let's see what's, I think we're back on to, what tell us about this a little bit? Is this connected to?
Oh, that was the Good Morning America interview.
America, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's not me on Good Morning America. That's a photograph that they asked me to send them.
Okay. And then next.
So this is my most recent piece that I wrote October 14th, because with the day that Trump got sick with COVID was day 200. I love counting. If you haven't noticed, my book is called Counting by Sevens. My father's an engineer, and so I love numbers. I always have. I have a lot of poems about numbers. I even have some poems, COVID poems, about like the counts of like people and places, and I do that a lot. So I kind of keep track, and I realized, oh my gosh, I'm close to 200 days. And then I did the math. I'm like, oh my gosh, it is 200 days. And so I wrote that.
Perfect, right?
Yeah, I couldn't have planned that. And that was written, going back to like these long haul communities that I'm part of online. And I was channeling or trying to represent a lot of the feelings that many of us felt when the president became sick with COVID. A lot of us had a feeling like nobody wished him ill. Let me be really clear. Like that is one universal feeling among people who've had a severe case of COVID, is you do not want anyone to get it, regardless of your politics, regardless of anything. You don't want anyone to get this. This is not something you wish on anyone, right? So nobody wanted him to get sick, right? Let me start with that. But there was a sort of feeling like maybe this will change things for us, because we feel like we have been pounding our heads against the wall in terms of like these long haul symptoms, and the fact that so many of us are going to be having long-term disabilities, and the ramifications of that on our healthcare system, on our workforce, on us individually, on education, on parents raising their kids, and like every facet of life in America, worldwide. It's not just an American situation, of course. But if 10% of the people who get sick with COVID are going to have long-term impacts, and a certain portion of those people are going to have really long-term impacts, that is huge crisis, right? In every level, in every country in the world. So we kind of felt like, oh, okay, this is like good. Like there's not good he got it, but this might be a moment of awareness raising. And so I wrote this piece sort of like reflecting that, and then the downplaying of the virus in the wake of that, and the move away from masks from a large portion of our country, like this sort of like insistence that, well, our president got better very quickly. Yes, on $100,000 worth of care. I've had no medicine for my COVID. He's on experimental top of the line drugs with the world-class medical facility. That is not the common person's experience with COVID. And I had excellent care. And so I feel like I'm sort of like, I'm fortunate with the care I received. And I know there are lots of people who are who've really struggled to get good care. So, if we hold the care the president received as sort of the level, if people have that in their mind, that that's what it is to have COVID, and you get this onslaught of treatment, and like you get helicoptered to your local military facility, that is not true. Then that's what that's what a lot of people were feeling, is like, this actually could be, this could maybe set us back here, because people need to know that this is not the standard of care. It's just not, this is experimental, and it's not even like a political issue. It's more just like, this is just the reality. This is not what we have the capacity for. I mean, you also could say it's a political issue, but take that out, and it's not. It's just a fact that we don't have that level of care, and people are still dying. And people are still catching the virus. And you know what, even if that is the level of care, you still don't want to play this game of Russian roulette. You don't. It is a game of Russian roulette. And when we hear people of like the COVID parties and such, that's so dismaying.
I'm sure there's plenty in the news that infuriated you, maybe also frightened you, and that's fully understandable. But yeah, I mean, I feel that sentiment that there are a lot of people who thought at that moment, like, oh, okay, maybe he'll finally get it or what have you. You know, I mean, get it in terms
Understand it.
of that compassion or empathy and so forth. Actually, it's better that people like you are representatives because because it's real. Your voice is genuine. Your struggle is a typical one, and you know everything from everything from the difficulty to getting oxygen to just your day-to-day struggles, just trying to like take care of yourself and get a bowl of soup in you. That's the reality. I think that's what resonates with people. And in your message about advocacy, basically, like just knowing that as that person, going back to the good patient, that you can't be just completely compliant about it. You have to raise your voice, so you have to demand the care, and you can't just kind of lay back and let it all happen. You in a sense have more experience with that, as being an advocate for yourself. But that's also an important message within all of this. So, what were you going to say?
I have temporarily forgotten what I was going to say.
Well, that's okay. All right.
Yeah, shoot. Now I have lost it. I forgot. But
no worries. Let's wrap up with let's just that image of your counting by sevens there once again, and going back to her love of numbers.
Photo on the cover.
There it is. There's
Jayne also took this photo of me.
What are the odds, really, that the cover art and the author photo would be done by the same person with her phone? But, can we jump to the slide of the red slide of counting by sevens? It's number 17. Just put that up there. And how can people purchase this book? What's the best way?
That's an excellent question. They have a few copies for local folks. They have a few copies at Word. They had some at Little City Books, but I think they're out. So I did reach out to them today asking if they would like some more copies. Maybe they will. But the simplest way is you could just send me an email, and my email address is right there, annwallace409@gmail.com, or you can go to my website, annwallacephd.com, and you can send me a message there. Like I have, so the book is $15, and anybody who orders it, I just pay for the shipping, and I just send it to you. So no shipping on top of that. Then I have that on my website. So and there's a form there you can fill out, a contact form. And if you'd like to order, I am happy to put a signed copy in the mail for you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think it's a supreme irony that there's a typo in your Twitter account or your Twitter handle. No wonder you don't like Twitter. I can just imagine you never want to use it. You're like, oh, whoops, I spelled my name wrong. I love it.
I did that Twitter account at a conference. It was at a cocktail hour, and somebody said, "You don't have Twitter? Let's set it up for you now." And Ann Wallace was taken. So my Twitter handle is AnnWallace409.
You can just go to the next slide. You can see it.
Right. Anyway, so that's a little bit embarrassing.
But you know what? It's a genuine story, and there's a little humor behind it. And
apparently, I could change that, but I just I'm sort of okay living with it, with the typo.
And this hasn't been the most.
Oh, that's great.
I'm sorry, we were stepping on each other. Go ahead, say that again.
And if that misspelling means people can't troll me on Twitter, that's fantastic. This job is done.
Well, hallelujah to that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to wrap it up in a minute, but I just wanted to know if there were any questions that were put into the chat, or if you would like to do that right now. Questions for Ann?
I have one question that came in directly to me. was to talk about, and thank you so much, you guys. It's so beautiful. Your heart is so open and inspiring to us. So thank you so much. So the question was asked about taking your story and being able to promote what you're going through, having the courage to do it, and also any kind of tips for someone who has their story that they want to get out there. You did it by posting and then things got picked up. But is there any other wisdom about getting people to know your story?
Like for anyone, like for getting one to know one story, I guess it depends on what your motivation, like not your motivation, what your goal is. So for me, my goal was, the poems were personal for the most part. So I wrote those. Many of them I have not finished revising. That takes a lot of effort, like a lot of energy and focus. And only if a handful have been published, maybe 7 or 8 of them. And I have like 50 COVID poems. So most of them haven't gone anywhere, but I will work on revising and sending them out. But that didn't feel like the urgent thing for me. For me, it was about the writing, and I know I have them, and I'll send them out to literary journals, and I'm going to put them together in some kind of collection. But if you're like, the reason for writing is to share your experience so other people know it, then just write, and write for whatever audience you have, which might be your family and your close friends, and that's fine. And it will be educational for those people. Like, that will be illuminating for them. People or watched it up close. Let me say that, or watched it up close. And that number is going to be fewer and fewer and fewer, sadly. But if you haven't been in it, you don't, like, it's harder to find that connection. And so anybody writing their story can help people identify with it and understand it and have that empathy and get that glimpse into something that is so widespread, and it's an important story to tell. So even if you're only reaching out to your close circle of friends, that in itself is meaningful. So do it. So it could be on your Facebook feed, or it could be on Twitter, or it could be on Instagram. Or you could start a blog. You can post things on Medium. You can start your own blog, or maybe you have a blog. Tell the story. There's so many people who are afraid of speaking up about COVID because there's still a bit of a shame about it, and they don't want people to think, oh, we can't go near you now, you're untouchable. One thing I think that Trump having been sick has helped is people understand that the infectious period is finite, right? So for a long time, I didn't know how long I was infectious, and I steered clear of everyone for a very long time. And even then, people are like, aren't you sick? I'm like, no, I'm not infectious. I've had a negative test result now. I've had multiple negative test results. But so one thing that we've learned from Trump is that, 14 days or so, and then the virus is no longer active. So my point was, so a lot of people are afraid of telling these stories because they're sort of shameful and there's a stigma. The more people tell the story, the less shame and stigma there is. That's how we get past that, is by people speaking up. But it's true of everything. It's true of AIDS. It's true of breast cancer. It's true, breast cancer used to be completely unspeakable when Audre Lorde got sick with it in the 70s, right? And she said, enough of this. I'm going to speak out, and I'm not going to wear a prosthetic breast and hide the fact I had a mastectomy. Think about where we are today. It's like a full circle. We're in a completely different, not full circle, 180 degrees is a completely different situation. We think, what's the politics of breast cancer? Everyone speaks up about that. That was not always the case. And the way that changes is by people speaking up and sharing with whatever circle they have, whether it's on the phone with your friends or by text messages with your friends or whoever it is. Speak up, share your story. People care. I mean, that's another thing, is like, people want to know if you're sick because they want to know, they want to help in any way they can, or they want to be thinking about you at least. Like, people feel terrible when they find out you've been sick and they are
They
talking
didn't
to
know.
someone else, right? Like they want to know. I want to know if my friends are sick with whatever, right? I want to know because I care about them.
Right. That's amazing. And that's our human connection. So that's the power we can put out in the world. So
Absolutely.
thank you. Awesome. Anne,
There's one more question.
Rena, are you seeing anything else coming?
I see a question in the chat about how I feel about being out and around people now. Am I concerned about getting it again? I am a bit of a hermit now, and quite happy with that. I'm fine with that. I am a little bit concerned about getting it in again. People have gotten it twice. I am concerned that I am not better yet. That's really the reason I'm a hermit, is that my energy is still really limited. I go to the doctor. I go for physical therapy. I hurt myself. I hurt my wrist very badly when I was sick because I was clumsy. And so I go for physical therapy for that. Like I go out, and when I go out for those things, that is like really draining, and that's it for the day for me. So so I'm not around people much, and I have no desire to catch this again. And I have no desire for any of my friends to catch it or anyone I know. So I do I don't go places really much of anywhere except where I need to be. I don't socialize except online, I guess. That I really don't do much of. So yeah, I kind of live this, I have read about it in my poem, An Abundance. I have this very pared down life right now. And yet I feel there's an abundance. I do not feel that my life has shrunk. I mean, in some ways it certainly has compressed, but I feel like it is very full nonetheless. And I couldn't, the abundance in that poem is very specifically about like all the support I felt coming in. And I still feel that, right? I mean, I wrote that in August, and it was like, somebody in my writing group wrote about writing from a place of abundance. I'm like, what is that? I have no abundance. And then I thought about it, and I'm like, yes, I do. I have a lot. And that's enough. And so as for like going out, I'll do that another year. I am in no rush. I would love to see all of your lovely faces in person. Let me say that. But on the other hand, I'm also in no rush.
That was beautiful. Awesome. Are you finding another question on Facebook?
And oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Not a question, but a very lovely comment from Valentina. It's in reference to Anne talking about that we need to speak up about our experiences. And Valentina said, this is so applicable to mental health too. And the way to destigmatize is to speak up. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. Val was one of my writing center tutors at Adelphi, and she has a PhD in psychology. So yeah, thank you. I that's a huge piece of it, is that if we don't speak up, and for me it's speaking, but it's also writing. If I don't write these things through, it's a way for me to take care of my own mental health. This is traumatizing, right? I feel like I have PTSD. I mentioned the sirens are triggering, right? There are so many things that I'm working through. This is a very, very difficult experience, and writing has been a way to work through it, and speaking has been a way to do so too, and to feel acknowledged, to find communities online where people acknowledge, people feel validated there when they can say something and people say, I hear you, and I'm so sorry that you're going through that, and I'm sorry no one believes you. And that might feel like, oh, how could it, like, that's not really generally my thing. but it is really, really important when people don't believe you that you're sick. And I've never had that happen. I mean, it's very clear. Nobody has ever doubted me. So I feel very fortunate in that regard. But I know that other people feel very, very lonely and alone. They are living alone, and they're living in a very lonely way through an illness that is really hard to live with. Oh, Jayne asked me if I have a COVID themed book.
That's not my question. It's somebody else's question. I was drawing your attention to it, but that's okay.
Oh, sorry. And Jayne direct messaged me.
I have the same question, but I think I know the answer to this.
Yes. The answer is yes, because I am working on this. Because I wrote in a number of genres, right? So I wrote the poems, I wrote the social media posts, which I don't know if I put in a book, but maybe, I don't know. I'm thinking of a multi-genre book because I also wrote a number of narratives. I have one of them published about an ER visit called Heartless. And that's on my website. You can find it there. I have a code page on my website, AnneWallacePhD.com. Put in the plug again. And I have a number of pieces that I never quite finished that are kind of rough, of narrative pieces, and like the Walden Pond piece. I have a piece about walking with Molly, and maybe that'll also be part of the Walden Pond piece. My daughter is Molly, and so when I was well enough to start walking, we would walk together, and that became our routine throughout the summer. And you know how unusual is it for a teenager to walk with her mother every day? So like that's a piece that I've tried to write a few times and I never quite brought it around to an ending yet. So anyway, so there are pieces like that I'm like essays, prose pieces, and I want to put them all together into a collection that kind of takes us right into this experience, this 7-8 months so far of living with COVID.
We look forward to that.
Yes, and that's my challenge for myself. Corey said, my colleague Corey Frost said, a book-length lyrical essay. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking along those lines. So, but I have to kind of dive into it and see where it takes me. And I've started collecting the bits. Now I have to put them together.
I'm sure you have. All right.
Well, I want to thank you both so much for inspiring us, motivating us to tell our story. You are role models, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'd like to also thank our team, Anna Carhart, our NJCU theater manager, Justin Tinker, the technical director at NJCU, and Sabrina Sabalo, our box office manager and Zoom maven. We thank you so much for the program and helping us here. Thank you everyone for being here. We hope that you come back and join us for some other programs. This Saturday, we have Debashish Bhattacharya, and we have Gina Chavez on November 14th. And on the 19th of November, a conversation with author Crystal Sital, moderated by Dr. Edwidge Junta. So you can visit our website, njcu.edu/arts for tickets. I hope everyone will buy Anne's book of poems and continue the inspiration. And yeah, I thank you very much for being here. Anne, Jayne, any last closing words?
I want to thank everybody very much for being here, and thank Anne for having the stamina to get through this and all that it took to put this together, and for writing as frequently as you do. These stories need to be told and held on to. We sometimes forget we are living in the midst of a huge historical shift, and people will remember this for, centuries to come, let's hope. Let's hope. But, just really important. And I really applaud you for everything that you've been doing, and your stamina, most of all, your stick-to-itiveness. Like you're running the marathon. This is what you do, just literally every day. So I think we all really appreciate that and your ability to share with all of us tonight. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
All
thank
right, everyone.
All right, thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
you. Bye.